This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, this is the September 24th, 2020 meeting of the Lewis and Clark Olney-Wallooskee Citizen Advisory Committee. My name is Gail Henderson. I'm the Community Development Director, and I am here with Jim Nikes, who is the sole member of the committee left standing at this point. So he and I are going to conduct this meeting in lightning speed time. So, Jim, do you have any opening remarks you'd like to make?
Are we now? Today I haven't even looked at the agenda. Are we okay? Now you're doing it. See, I don't have any control because we went over the phone this time. So, is this? Are we still on the wetland stuff, or are we moved on beyond wetlands? So,
well, we're moving on. We're going to come back to wetlands in probably March after Crest.
Okay. Okay.
But if you'd like to say something about wetlands, I'd welcome your comments.
Well, I just like to talk about my little violation business the other day. That if we're going to have a county policy on turning people into the Division of State Lands, it would certainly be nice to have your code compliance guys contact the landowner and actually do a site visit before they erroneously call up Dan Carey and give him a map with a big red blotch on it in the middle of a wetland that had no basis in fact whatsoever, taken from an adjacent parking lot. So, my biggest problem with this was, and I told you, Guy, that it would be nice to contact somebody prior to getting all the state agencies involved and costing the landowner extensive amounts of money when he, in fact, never did anything. There you go.
Okay, I think that's a very fair comment, and we will definitely do that in the future.
Okay, very good. That's my wetlands bitch, so continue on.
Okay.
We have a new member.
Commissioner Webb has joined our meeting. Commissioner, would you like to make any opening remarks?
No, my apologies for being late. Of course, just as I was printing out the materials, both of my printer cartridges went dry on me, so I apologize. But I'm here now.
Wonderful. We're glad you're here. Just so you know, Commissioner, another one of our members, Paula Bew, submitted her resignation this evening. So it's just Jim is the only member of the committee who's here tonight. So it will probably be a pretty short meeting, I would suspect.
But I'm seeing that they're, oh, I see. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, that makes me so sad. So Jim Nikes is here?
Yes.
That because I recognize your voice, Jim.
Oh, I'm on the. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I just did it through the phone, so I have no camera capability. With that note, I did talk to Jason Palmberg today, and I told him what we were doing here, and he sounded like he might be interested in joining this, so he might be a good one.
Okay. Can you point him towards the application or have him call me and then I can get him the application?
Sure, I'll have him get a hold of you. But he did sound like he was interested in joining in. I told him there was nobody left.
It's pretty much starting to look that way. Okay, thank you, Jim. All right, so.
Excuse me, Gail. Yeah. Has Mike Magyar resigned from this committee as well?
He has not. He was here last month, and I'm not. Yeah. I have not heard from him. I have not heard from Andrea Mazzarella in a couple of months now, so I'm not sure what's going on with them. And I don't know if Julia's been in contact with them. She's off this week and next week, so.
Okay.
We do have an advertisement out, so I encourage everybody to promote it. So our next item of business is review of the meeting summary from August 27th. Jim, did you have any corrections, additions, or deletions?
No.
Okay. All right. So I think we've covered public comment, unless Commissioner.
You went away. You're gone, Gail. You're gone.
Okay.
No,
Sorry,
Gail. There you are. There you are.
Something went haywire and it wouldn't let me take myself off mute. But okay, so moving on, public comment. I think we've covered that unless Commissioner Webb has any other public comment or input to start off our meeting.
No, thank you.
Okay. So next up is our review of Goal 5, Historic and Cultural Resources. We have 3 tasks that Jim needs to complete tonight if he so chooses. The first task is looking at the existing list of inventoried places. It's a variety of places that are compiled from lists from the National Register, the State Historic Preservation Office, and Jim's task number 1 is to let me know if there are any sites on that list. It's the list that has kind of the teal turquoise list of places. Are there any sites on there that you think we should include in the comp plan that aren't in there and that you would like staff to bring back more information to this committee about?
Nothing I could see. Story Marine Construction's kind of not there anymore. So that seems like a funny a site, but historic site. But let me see. Let me look at it. We have Fort Stevens. Archgate Tunnel. We got my place, Crown Camp. That's definitely historical. Done in, it was built in 1923. Had 27 houses. I actually have the original site map.
Oh wow! Is
Yep.
it a
It was
place
a big
that's
log.
worthy
Big
of?
log.
Do you think it's a place that deserves extra protection or that we should call out in the comp plan?
Not really. I don't know. It's been altered so much over the years that it's just mainly more or less an industrial site. So I don't know. I guess it's got as much as the shipyard, but whatever. No, it looks good. I don't see anything off the top of my head that.
Okay. All right. Well, in the course of this meeting, if something does pop into your head, let us know.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So then task number 2 is we need to go through the existing policies in the comp plan, figure out what's been met, what needs to be changed, what should be removed, what should be added. So those are our tasks here. So the first policy is policy 1. The county encourages the State Parks Division when developing a master program for Ecola Park to give proper recognition to the historical activities that occurred there. We have a staff note that says that there was an Ecola Park master plan done in 1975. It's never been updated since that time. The Clatsop Plains CAC recommended changing policy 1 to not talk only about historical activities, but to actually call out the Clatsop tribe of the Chinook Nation and their historic activities that were done there, including harvesting seafood, cedar, and spruce. And then the countywide CAC completely struck the entire policy, recommended striking the entire policy and replacing it with Clatsop County shall seek to work cooperatively countywide with state agencies, cities, the Clatsop County Historical Society, the Chinook Nation, the Clatsop Nehalem Confederated Tribes to recognize and protect cultural and historic sites. So, and
Yep,
can you
looks
see my
good.
screen?
Yep.
Which,
Yep, I can.
oh,
Wiggling
oh,
around, yes.
all right. So which part of it looks good? The keeping the
last-
policy, the last one? Okay.
Your last statement, the Clatsop County shall seek.
Okay, got it. Hold on a second. All right, moving on to policy number 2. The countywide recommended completely striking that policy as it's been completed. The canon's been moved to the museum.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Moving on to policy 3. This is dealing with the county parks department and funding and maintenance for the Lindgren cabin. And the county does continue to maintain that and keep budgeting money for the maintenance of it. Is this a policy that we should retain?
Yes.
Okay.
How much do they spend on it a year? You know?
I don't. I
Pretty
couldn't
low
find the
maintenance.
Yeah, pretty low maintenance.
Gail,
Yeah.
excuse me, I think I might have some very current information about this. Actually, just a few hours ago, we had a parks meeting, and one of the issues about the way this policy is stated is that it excuse me, that's the wrong word. A couple of years ago, and I don't know their name, but one of the Nordic historical societies, primarily out of Portland, agreed to take on the renovation of the Lundgren cabin, and it was moved onto a piece of property that I'm not sure, as I think about it, whether it's on Carnahan or Cullowhee. And that group agreed after they renovated the cabin that they would host it to be open on weekends between Memorial Day and Labor Day, and that the Parks Department would maintain the grounds around it. And one of the unfortunate things that has happened over this summer of pandemic, et cetera, is that group has not been able to fulfill their obligations. And so I hesitate. You know, a comp plan is supposed to be a very broad document. And so a couple of the verbs in here are difficult. Continue to maintain the Lindgren House. This policy really doesn't speak to having it open to the public or to restoration and maintenance. And so I have now asked the Parks Department to maybe come up with some new wording for us that could work better for everyone. I happen to think this is an incredible jewel in our park's crown. I really do. I just think it's fabulous. But we obviously need to get more stable management of the site. And I think the Parks Department can do that.
Okay, that's
Does
wonderful.
anybody know what, isn't it just a hollow cabin? What does it take to maintain the thing? Does anybody know that?
Yeah, in fact, I think the Parks Department took a very careful look at that a few years ago and decided that in terms, one of the things that makes this cabin unique is that it is built to the in a fashion that was a kind of a classic Nordic fashion, and so it isn't so much the maintenance of, it's not like Williamsburg, which is the farms that are being maintained as they were in those days. It's the construction of the cabin that is so noteworthy. And it's just a matter of being able to, and I've asked the Parks Department to maybe ask this group in Portland. I mean, we have so many descendants of Nordic peoples right here in Clatsop County. And it seems to me that if we put out an appeal and created some kind of an entity that the Parks Department could perhaps husband, that might work. And I think it's interesting to me that in all of the policies here, given our long list of historic resources, this one was kind of singled out. So, and I believe it should. I mean, I'm not sure it should be singled out, but I do agree that it's a very historic resource, and we have to kind of make the promise that we're going to make this work. And so we just have to decide how we're going to put that into a policy statement.
Okay.
So, Commissioner, are you working with Steve Meschke on that, or with the Recreational Lands Board?
Yes, I'm the board liaison to the Rec and Parks Department, or to the Citizen Advisory Committee. Excuse me.
Okay, so you're working with the committee and not necessarily Steve himself, right?
Well, Steve is the committee. I mean, Steve.
He's the staff liaison.
It's his committee.
Okay, all right. And I see Andrea's here. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
Okay, so to kind of fill you in where we're at right now, Andrea, first of all, let me ask, did you have any corrections, additions, or deletions to the August meeting summary?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then on the inventory of known historic places that have been identified by the National Historic Register or by the State Historic Preservation Office, were there any of the places that were listed that are not already in our comp plan that you feel we should pull out for extra research and consideration for including in the comp plan?
Nothing that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. So then we had moved on, and just so you know, Andrea, Paula tendered her resignation tonight. So
Oh, okay.
we do have a call out for applicants for this committee. So if you know of anyone in the area, planning area, who would be a good fit or be interested in doing this, please encourage them to call me or visit the county's website.
Sure, I will. Oh, that's too bad that Paula's not doing it.
Yeah, she's gonna go help her grandkids, or her kids take care of the grandkids with schooling and.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I do know a few people out there that might be interested in joining in. So that's a good. I'll send them your email. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, and then Jim and I had started going through the policies. There were a couple of recommendations that came out of the other citizen advisory committees. The Clatsop Plains CAC had recommended that the policy be amended to specifically address and include the historic traditional activities of the Clatsop tribe of the Chinook Indian Nation. The countywide CAC went even further than that and recommended striking the policy entirely and replacing it with the policy that's in purple. Can you see my screen? Or are you on the
I
phone,
don't see it.
Andrea?
I'm on my phone, but I can figure out how to see
That's
it.
okay. I can read it. So what the countywide has recommended is a new policy one that says Clatsop County shall seek to work cooperatively countywide with state agencies, cities, the Clatsop County Historical Society, the Chinook Nation, the Clatsop-Nehalem Confederated Tribes to recognize and protect cultural and historic sites. And so Jim was in favor of going with the countywide proposed policy, but what are your thoughts?
So the purple, I can see your screen now. So the purple is whose recommendation?
That would be the countywide citizen advisory committee.
Yeah. I like the way that is worded, and it seems really inclusive.
Okay, so we have agreement on that one.
Yes.
Then on policy 2, staff is recommending that it be deleted because the policy has been completed and the canon has been located to the museum. So Jim was in favor of deleting that as well. And your thoughts?
I will agree with Jim on that.
Okay. And then when you arrived, we were just discussing policy 3. So what are your thoughts about that?
I did listen to some of what Pamela was saying as I signed in, which made sense about the parks. So it's just continuing to have the Parks Department maintain it, but we're curious about the cabin being open to the public and if there is a need for restoration or additional maintenance. That looks good. That all looks good to me.
Okay, so Commissioner Webb, are you going to be our special liaison with the Parks and Rec Committee to help us with that policy wording?
Absolutely.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so we've got that noted. Moving along to policy 4, this one deals with the commemorative plaques that were supposed to be placed at the Falls Mill, the Falls Pulp Mill site, which is out by Young's River, or was, and then the Shepherd and Moore Sawmill, which was out in Westport. So staff did contact the County Historical Society and State Historic Preservation Office to see if they had any information about those plaques. We have still not received a response back from the County Historical Society, but we did hear back from SHPO, who said that they do not track those types of plaques and that they did not have any additional information. So at this point, I know the Northeast Committee was in favor of leaving it in there and seeing if we could get a plaque. So what are your thoughts, Jim and Andrea?
Go ahead.
Excuse me for being so pushy about this. Jim, are you and I the only people who can be seen here?
I don't know,
Oh
can you
my
see
God, I'm
me?
the only person who can be seen.
You're the only person, and Gail's there.
And Gail.
I'm over the phone though, so.
Oh my God, then I really do feel very pushy for this.
Push
It
away.
seems that in the time since our original comp plan stipulated certain sites. First of all, we have uncovered many more important sites. I have been working with the County Historical Society to try to interest them in more work in the rural parts of the county. And you know, they and so one of the things that I think is very germane to this conversation is that in our tourism industry, we know from surveys of both both businesses in the tourist industry and also statewide consumers of our tourism, and they are increasingly interested in outdoor recreation in the county and in getting away from the beach and appreciating Clatsop County for some of the historical and rural resources that we have. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be maybe an opportune time, especially after looking at what the city of Astoria has done on the Riverwalk and other highly used paths, to be able to construct some plaques, if that's what we're going to call them, about a number of our amazing rural historic places in the county. And so this, when this was written, obviously these were passions of the folks who were on the Comp Plan Advisory Group. I'd like to suggest that we perhaps study the opportunities for designing a rural architectural route. We have food routes. We have farm routes. That's ROUTES. And it seems to me that in rural Clatsop County, we have so many, even if they're gone, places that we should perhaps mark what had been the historical presence of very important facilities in our past. A lot of sawmills, a lot of, well, just they're innumerable, including Native American activities that happened. So I'm kind of wondering if I couldn't worm my way into the county-wide CAC through this group, since this is my district.
I have a couple questions. Oh, sorry. Continue.
Okay.
I'm glad that you brought up the different sites, historical sites that maybe aren't listed. One question, and I don't know if anyone here knows the answer, is are those sites cataloged somewhere? Do we have like a document or a book or a pamphlet or anything where even if there's not a plaque at the site, where someone could look and see, just for our own historical memory? Because as time continues to go on, things get forgotten, and I do think that commemorating our past is important. So maybe, I don't know if that's another, I'm not trying to add more work to anybody's plate, but I don't know if that already exists, where someone could just, even there could be a map with all the different little sites marked, and then like a legend saying what those little sites were, and have that be available online or something for people that are interested in that, because some people really are. I know the installment and maintenance of plaques at each location might cost more money, but maybe at least there could be a record of the sites available that won't get lost with time, because I like that idea a lot. And I do like including the different local indigenous tribes in both deciding in both the events and locations, and also helping maybe look at verbiage, because I know there was kind of a big thing with the Parks Department about the plaque at the fort behind the Fort George, because the verbiage originally said something about how the I don't remember what the original verbiage was, but it was something about a battle and you know, the settlers brutally defeating the natives, or something that was kind of seen as offensive, even if it was what happened. And anyway, there was a whole to do about it. So I would just want there to be someone from maybe whatever local tribes where the land is, where the plaques are being placed, in the informing or like committee, or I don't know how that would work, but I know Parks is developing a committee for that sort of thing. So
Andrea, one of the only thing that I am aware of are, other than our, you know, we have a statewide brochure, excuse me, a countywide brochure for fishing spots and campgrounds and things like that. But the only other thing I'm aware of is that the Granges have gotten together. And for those of us who love the architecture and the cultural history of Granges, they've gotten together and produced a brochure. But I'm not sure it's widely circulated. So it's that kind of thing that I would love to see us, you know, really address, really figure out a good way to do this. The county is now funding the tourist industry in the county. And it might be something that we could task them with, at least beginning and working with the Historical Society to get done.
my other thought or question, and this might be more of a question for Gail to look or have staff look into, would be, so if you said the county is financially contributing to tourism, I guess my question is, what would the potential impact be? Say we have these historical sites and we're promoting them as places for tourists to see, like something, and this is going to admittedly be a little bit selfish, something that I love about like Nato Landing, for example, is I can go there when downtown is packed, when the lake's packed, when the beaches are packed, I can take my kayak there and go and enjoy the land, and I'm not dealing with hordes of people. And I don't necessarily believe that hordes of people going there would be a benefit to the land either. So I don't know how we determine the benefit. You know, if people coming to a place more when it's a place in nature, they're not paying money to go to it. How are we benefiting from their foot traffic versus how are we promoting it? If we are promoting it as a tourist destination, does that also open us up for potential grants and stuff? Because I know that there are grants available for things that are technically considered tourism related, and so there might be a value. I see value on both sides of that. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying. I'm just kind of rattling.
No, Andrea, you're not rattling. You're giving kind of both sides of the decision we often have to make at the county level in terms of promoting tourism. So, you know, we because of our transient lodging tax, we have to spend 70% of that on tourism promotion. Although some of us are hoping that's going to change in the next legislative session. But this is the kind of thing that perhaps could be spent in a way that is is more celebratory in terms of our rural heritage.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Jim, did you have any thoughts? I know you had said keep the policy, but did you have any additional thoughts you wanted to add?
Not really. They've covered way more than I would even have thought about. But there are some of these sites like your fall site. Oddly enough, you're out at your county stockpile at the falls. They've actually got a couple of the old rock wheels, the pulping wheels that are sitting as entrances to the stockpile site. So somebody might want to talk about preserving those a little bit. But the plaque idea, I kind of like the plaque idea because that's simple and it's cheap. And maybe making a map, of all the old historic sites, which there's many, many, many. There's the Tidewater Railroad that ran up through Highway 202 and at the first rock bluffs. Actually, on my piece of property, there's actually where the railroad was cut through a solid granite bank, and there's that, and then there's Barth Falls that's right there off to the right, and that was all part of the old railroad. And those sites are kind of neat too. And it would be nice to have some kind of just a map that identified some of these. And while there's still people alive that can remember them and could tell you where they're all at, maybe they should be documented.
I think that would be super cool. I would be really fascinated because I think that's something we're all losing. My generation and even the younger generations that don't have the direct relationships with the elders in this community to get to hear those stories or to get to walk out on the land and have someone tell us what used to be there from their memory. It's kind of, I don't know, I think it's really special. I would be super into helping with that if I could somehow. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and like I say, I do know a couple real old timers that were in the logging industries and stuff that do have some pretty good knowledge still, but they're all getting on into their 80s now, and somebody ought to really just document it, if nothing else. Maybe it's something the Historical Society or somebody can do.
All right, so the policy similar to this one, the county shall work to identify and map historic rural places and buildings in order to preserve that knowledge for future generations. How do we want to wordsmith that one? Is that something that we're in agreement on?
Yes, that sounds good.
Yep, I like it.
Okay. All right, we'll go with that one. And then, hold on. I remember. All right, moving on to policy 5. This policy was related to rezoning the Classic Plain Cemetery. It has been completed and staff is recommending that it be removed. Would there be any objections to that?
No, I'm good with it.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Policy 6, let's see, had to do with protecting the historical character of certain places that are identified in Goal 5. We do have this regulations in the standards document in section 3.192 that spells out those requirements. Our recommendation as staff is to change that to read that the county will continue to protect. But what are your thoughts on that one?
I don't really have, I don't really have any notes. I mean, it seems like the requirements used to protect the historic sites is already sufficient and effective. There's nothing to indicate that it's not, so I don't see any reason why we would need to change it. Does that seem right?
I agree with that.
Okay, so are you amenable to having the county will continue to protect?
Yes.
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay. All right. All right, so then policy 7 under historic sites talks about working with the Historical Society and the State Historic Preservation Office to evaluate the historical significance of sites and buildings that were identified by the Citizen Advisory Committee. And then it says that we were supposed to take appropriate action to protect any sites that are placed on the State of Oregon Inventory of Historic Sites and Buildings, and that would be completed within the next 2 years. So the regulations that we have specifically in our code protect only these sites up here, the Tillamook Lighthouse, Morrison House, which is at the Tag Ranch, I think, Clatsop Plains Memorial Church, and the Westport Log Tunnel. Going back to 1979, 1980, I am not sure what sites at that time were on the historic inventory that the state had. So there's a little bit of ambiguity. Right now, the state site lists over 1,900 historic inventoried sites in Clatsop County. 60 of those are within the unincorporated areas. So what do you think we should do with this? The countywide advisory committee at their meeting last week basically adopted the entire list and adopted it by reference, and basically said that we acknowledge that these are additional sites that have been identified by the State Historic Preservation Office. So what are our thoughts about this one? I mean, I guess I'll just be quiet for a moment.
I don't see anything that is necessary beyond what they've done. And I mean, that sites that are going to come up, I don't know that there could be any more sites. I guess there's minor sites, but I think that what they've got is a pretty good inventory, and it should probably be preserved.
Right, I guess I don't quite know the process of determining whether a site should be on the inventory of historic sites and buildings. So that's something that the county staff would be doing.
Right. So what we're trying to do is we want to identify sites that have already been identified by another entity. So we're not necessarily, or we could, but right now what we're focused on is just going through the list that the state has already put together, and they have done some of the legwork. But what we want to do here in the county is we want to pull out sites from that state list and say, okay, in terms of land use, if I have, and I'll use Astoria Marine Construction just because it's right in front of me. If we wanted to say Astoria Marine Construction is worthy of some additional protections and from what gets developed around it, that's the reason that we're looking at this, is where are those sites in the county that have such historical significance that they need to be protected from what goes on around them. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes total sense.
Okay.
But Astoria Marine Construction, again, has been altered so heavily at this point, it isn't even what it was. I mean, they've taken and torn half of it down. They're filling in all the ways and everything else because of the contamination. But,
Right.
it's still a site, but I probably don't believe that it should be restricted from future, whatever the DEQ will allow them to do on the site. I don't think it should have that done to it. Go ahead.
Well, one of the issues though with that particular site is that right now it's a brownfield site, and right now, as we speak, the site is being taken down as a greenfields, excuse me, as a brownfield site, and it's being completely disassembled. And so, to me, the idea of putting up a plaque that says this was a site where during World War, what would that have been? One, they
Well,
constructed.
it was
They
late World War II. It was World War II into the 50s. The last mine sweeper was built in the 50s.
Okay, so it is an historic site, but there will be nothing left of it in the next couple of weeks. I mean, in terms of anything to look at. So and that's probably an issue all over the unincorporated part of the county. I mean, we have a lot of things that were very cool that happened there over the past 200 plus years, but there's no semblance of them left.
Yeah, I'm by no means not saying that it shouldn't be maybe a plaque and be recognized, and there's a lot of history on it that is online and everything else, but obviously what I'm saying, what I was relating to, that if whatever future uses you could do it, you don't restrict it because it's a historic site. You see what I'm saying?
I guess what might be challenging would be, like you're saying, if the site already is unrecognizable, then why not at least use it for something that it could be useful for now, rather than just having it sit there unrecognizably what it used to be and unusable now. Totally makes sense to me. I wonder if there's a way to determine, or like, how do people weigh the balance between preservation and the usefulness of a space? Because I don't think everything needs to be frozen in time, but I do like limiting development if it does allow for there to be some places that are special. Like, I mean, that's why like national parks are so incredible, is there's these little pieces of nature that are, kind of untouchable, and we need a little bit of that. But I agree with you that go ahead.
I believe some of it, I think the DEQ is going to require some of it to just be an open space, probably with what experience I've had with the DEQ and contaminated sites, that portions of it will be open space that cannot have buildings on it. But there's probably parcels that can be used, and the reflection of that is it's marine construction now, which is a very limited use, and maybe somebody ought to consider doing something different with the zone, or work with Mr. Fasterban about making some use of the thing after he gets done with what has to be done there.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is we might want to look at possibly a new policy that encourages adaptive reuse of old buildings. Is that what I'm hearing?
Maybe something, gosh, yeah, I guess something on a case by case. Again, I don't like I don't like creating policy that just makes a lot of work for someone else in the future to have to deal with. But I wonder if there, you know, if someone wants to take an old historic building and turn it into a wedding venue and destination, whatever, could there be a review process, and who would be the people reviewing that to approve it? Like, not allowing it to be a free for all, but also allowing it there to be a group of citizens that are that people agree are, you know, maybe the county commissioners or whoever reviews that and decides if that's a use that the community would want the space to be used for, rather than it just sitting unused, or what, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. All right, so I'm trying to formulate this in my head. So what we would need to look at would be the zoning codes. And
Yeah,
then
Yes.
mainly see if the zoning still applies to what's left. Because like I say, the contamination was all over the water and the existing ways that came up from the water that they filled in at this point. I believe that partials of the building are going to remain, but I don't know that for sure. But obviously, it's going to be really tough to do anything marine constructive type in that area. So like I say, working with Mr. Fastaban to come up with an alternative zoning for that parcel. That fits with obviously the neighborhood, which is mostly residential.
okay. So I don't know if it would necessarily be a change to a different zoning classification, but because we couldn't spot zone something. But what we could possibly do is put in a use that talks about, I have to think about this, but that would cover a historic building, that it could become a conditional use based on certain something. I don't know. I'd have to think about that one. But we want, go ahead.
I just a thought, it's already a spot zone being what it is, but the thought, and like I say, I can't talk for Mr. Fastaban or what he wants or what his intentions are, but you would think that obviously, since everything there is residential, it's on sewer, and that it is obviously waterfront, that obviously they're going to have some of an open space, but it seems to me that a great use for that would be some duplexes or multiple family stuff right there on the water. I mean, that would fit with the neighborhood and, limited access and everything else to it.
Okay. All right. And would we want this type of policy where we're trying to encourage the preservation and reuse of old buildings? Would that apply only to buildings that are on the state inventory, which is what policy 7 addresses? But
are they on the historic? Are they on the historic registry?
Yes, they're both listed on the National Register, and they're also on the state's inventory of historic sites.
Huh. Interesting. Huh.
So quick question. Oh, sorry. I just had a quick clarification. What we're talking about, this policy, is not just for the specific property that we're discussing right now. We're just using that as an example. Is that correct?
That's kind of specific. Specific to that property.
But if we're creating, I'm just curious if we're creating a policy for all the potential properties in the future that are in the historic registry or process, I guess we're looking at. We're not just talking about this one isolated specific property right now.
Correct.
Okay. And then my next question was, if I wonder if we're just looking at the state properties that are on the state registry, Do you think it's possible, either Gail or Pam or Jim for that matter, do any of you think it's possible that there are important pieces of land or properties or buildings that we could be overlooking if we don't try to look outside of what's already on the state registry? Because I'm not knowledgeable about that, but I wonder if any of you think there might be properties we should try to protect that aren't currently being on anyone's list, I guess.
Well, obviously, most important properties have been obviously inventoried over the years. They're, you know, like the Fall Mill site's a prime example of one that hasn't been inventoried and most people don't know about. There are a few little areas, you know, the sites are completely gone, but there are little areas that, like I say, should be probably recognized through maps and maybe, you know, like you say, placards or anything else. But all the, what I would say important sites have already been very documented and very recognized.
Is it possible that there may be sites that aren't recognized, that if we asked, like if we asked the Chinook or Clatsop tribes if there was a site that maybe they think should be recognized that maybe the state hasn't recognized, is there a way to ask them? Because I don't think we need to go out and search for sites. That I feel like the state does a really good job of that, and I feel like the state's pretty inclusive of those native sites, but I don't know, and I can't speak for that group. That group might not think that it's inclusive enough, and I don't know. But I do want to consider their position.
Gail,
Always
perhaps
easy
you
to
could
ask.
talk about the list of Native American sites that they would prefer not to make public. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so typically archaeological sites are not disclosed to the public just to limit looting opportunities, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. So there are 90 sites, archaeological sites, that have been identified within Clatsop County by the State Historic Preservation Office. At the Clatsop Plains meeting, when we talked about this, Donna Bing, who is the representative for the Chinook Indian Nation, he has specifically put in a request to SHPO to see if the tribe can get a list of those sites. There's a little bit of politics involved in this because of the fact that Clatsop and Chinook are not federally recognized tribes. So there is a little bit of politics at play as well. So while it's important to know where the sites are and to keep an internal list, that would probably not be something that we'd want to publicize or necessarily put a plaque by, unless, of course, you know, the traditional peoples who inhabited that site were in agreement with it.
Cool. Okay. Well, can we have something maybe that is just the thought to include those sites under the protection, but not to be publicized in the tourism piece? Is it possible to do both? Like, we're not promoting that the sites exist, but we're protecting them as a county from however someone might want to exploit that, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and we can do that. We do have some language in the standards that does talk about archaeological remains, and if you do find something on your property, and it's very standard general archaeological practice that if you were to find bones or anything like that, you immediately stop digging and you contact the State Historic Preservation Officer. I know that Clatsop Plains would like to include language recognizing or including the Chinook Indian Nation as one of the entities that gets noticed if a body or bones are found on a property. And according to the original comp plan, this office had a list of 53 archaeological sites back in 1980, but nobody in this office knows whatever happened to that list. So we've been working with SHPO to get the updated list of the 90 sites that they now have inventoried. But yes, to answer your question, Andrea, yes, we can do both.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on policy 7? Okay, hearing none. There are 2 cultural policies
Nothing
that we
from
need
me.
to read. Okay, thank you, Andrea. Okay, so there are 2 cultural policies for cultural resources. First one, again, this is kind of that boilerplate language that is very standard across the archaeological world. First one is that if you're going to affect the integrity of a known archaeological site, you need to consult with the State Historic Preservation Office and put together a plan to either preserve it or protect the site. And this is where the Clatsop Plains CAC wanted to include language about also consulting with the Chinook Indian Nation prior to actually consulting with SHPO. So thoughts about that one?
I agree with the county-wide, or with the Clatsop Plains rather, recommendations. That looks great.
No, I agree.
Okay. Okay. All right, and then policy 2 is very similar, that if you do find cairns, graves, or other significant archaeological resources while you're in the process of a project that you might not have known were there, again, you're supposed to halt your project, contact the State Historic Preservation Office, and Clatsop Plains added that same language about consulting with the Chinook Indian Nation first, and then going to SHPO. So is that something you would both agree with as well?
I agree.
I agree. And I'm sorry, because I'm going to ask what I sort of feel like is a stupid question really quick. Is the Clatsop tribe doing a member of one of the Chinook nations, or are they a separate tribe?
So
Like, do we
that
need to
is
be
not
including them by name?
that is not a stupid question at all, and every single one of the CACs is having this discussion right now. Some are having very spirited discussions about it, and I don't know the answer. And so what we need to do as staff is to reach out to the different entities to see basically what they prefer to be called, how they're connected or not connected. And there's a lot of discussion and disagreement among the CAC members. So I think reaching out would be helpful. And that's my answer.
Okay, that's what I guess. I think there's been disagreement among the different tribes probably over time. So that makes sense. Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if they were all, because there's 5 different tribes maybe that make up the Chinook, maybe depending on who you ask.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe, I guess the point in asking the question is because I don't want a group to be excluded. So if we only include one term and then there's one group of people that say, hey, we have claim to this land too, we are also, Indigenous members of the Pacific Northwest region. How come we are not also being included on the decisions? And I don't want to be unintentionally dismiss an entire community of people. Maybe I do have one contact at the Chinook Nation here that I was kind of a associate of mine, so maybe I'll send her an email and just see if she can give me any clarity or direct me to the right person to ask.
I
Does that seem okay?
I believe the Chinooks are the only indigenous tribe on the lower Columbia. That's all.
Okay. And Andrea, to answer your question, so the Chinook Indian Nation did actually formally give us a representative that the board appointed back in April, May, I don't know, at some point in the past. So we do actually have an authorized representative from the Chinook Nation. Where we need some assistance, if you have any contacts, especially, is how the Clatsop relate, because it's gone back and forth between Chinook Indian Nation and the Clatsop tribe of the Chinook Indian Nation. And then also reaching out to, I guess, the Nehalem tribes. If you have any contacts there, that would be really useful.
I wish that I did, but I may know someone that does. So the Nehalem tribes. Sorry, just taking notes so I don't forget. And Clatsop. Okay, perfect. I'll try to do some research and bring something back around.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so this brings us to task number 3, our last and final task of the evening. This is the worksheet where we can look at identifying new issues or policies that we would want to recommend be included in the updated comprehensive plan. So this worksheet contains some of the staff recommendations, and it contains some of the other CAC recommendations. For example, the Northeast Committee wanted to have Bradwood and Clifton be considered as historic sites, particularly the net shed that is in Clifton, I believe. So they wanted to include language about that. This is a staff recommendation, and this was discussed way back in March, just before we went into lockdown, about having the county explore becoming a certified local government, and that would open up additional funding sources for us for historic sites and properties throughout the county. So we had a recommended policy about that. One thing that we have not addressed in the comprehensive plan, and actually very few of the CACs have talked about, except for the Swenson Cemetery, is we don't have any policies or language that talks about the historic cemeteries in the county. So that may be something that you may want to make a recommendation about. Let's see. And then we tried to include more recommendations about being more inclusive, developing more public education, and just doing a better job about outreach and education about the value of our historic sites. So I guess first of all, let me ask, are there issues related to historic and cultural resources that you feel are not adopted in the plan or addressed in the plan right now? What would those be?
I have none.
Can you just ask that last question again and make sure that I'm totally actively listening while you say it before I answer?
Yeah. So what this option does here is this is the time where we identify issues that either didn't exist in 1980 or weren't addressed in the 1980 comp plan. So we want to identify what those issues are, and then we can, come up with possible wording to create a policy that would address them. So, for example, this was the one staff put in. So the issue was about becoming a certified local government, which, if it was thought about back in the day, was never addressed in the comp plan. So the draft policy that we came up with was the county shall obtain public input in order to determine whether there is public support for the county becoming a certified local government. So not saying that we were going to do it absolutely, but that we would at least take that first step to figure out if there would be public support for the county, even looking at that type of program and the possible regulations that might come along with it. Did that answer your question there, Andrea?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay. So I know Jim didn't have any issues that he thought had not been addressed in the comp plan, but Andrea, do you have any thoughts or issues that you think we've missed on the comp plan that we need to address?
Oh, nothing that's been like on a list in my mind nagging at me. No, I feel like this has been really thorough and well thought out process. Gail, I feel like you guys have done an incredible amount of work to get to us to this point. Yeah, for real.
So you did actually come up with some new policy language when we were looking at the existing policies. And it's not your last bite at the apple. So as we go through this, you can always email me if you think of something. We can bring it up again at another meeting. So it's not the end of it, but
okay,
may pop up that we haven't thought about.
That's great. I mean, these conversations for me are so valuable. Every time that I actually remember to log on to the damn meetings and talk with you guys, I feel like I learn so much, and questions come up because, Jim or somebody else has a piece of information that I don't have, and then that leads to another question. So I think it's a super useful process. I appreciate being a part of it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we don't have anything there, so that I think brings us back to public input on our agenda. Yes, it does. Commissioner Webb, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to share?
Thank you so much. I'm very discouraged that we've lost a number of really valuable members on this committee. And so I hope that we'll all reach out and try to bring folks in. I don't know whether I'm super impressed when two people can be in a meeting, or maybe that's the way all of our committees ought to be, is just two people. Maybe that's the way to get things done. I don't know. But thank you both very much. It's really been, I love your commitment to this process, and please stay with us and reach out to your neighbors, etc., and other people and bring them in, because this work is incredibly important. And thank you so much for coming tonight and any other night. Thanks.
Okay. So then, moving on, our next agenda item is review our next meeting date and time. So we have the next meeting scheduled at 6 p.m. on Thursday, October 22nd. Is that still good for both of you?
Good for me.
Works
Wait
for
a
me.
minute.
Yep.
Wait a minute. I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be gone the 21st through the 27th, and I'm going to be in Phoenix, and I doubt if I'm smart enough to do it from there.
Okay. Well, do you want to look at moving the meeting? I know we don't have Mike here, and I know his schedule is limited as well. So do we just kind of want to see what happens on the 22nd, Andrea, and it may just be you and me?
Can
Do you
can
want
you
to?
do it like a Monday or on the Monday, the 20th or 19th or whatever it is?
I can
Hold
do it
on one
either of
second.
those days if you guys can.
Yeah, I can do either one as well, Monday or Tuesday. Do you have a preference, Jim?
Monday would probably be good.
Okay, 6 p.m.
Sure. And that's 19th?
Yep, that's the
Is that
19th.
okay?
That works for me.
Okay, got it. Okay, and then at that meeting on the 19th, we'll need to talk about our November and December meetings because right now they are scheduled to fall on Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Eve. So we'll need to talk about what we want to do with our November and December meetings next month. All right, and
Okay.
that brings us to the very end, our last item, which is closing comments and adjournment. Anything else for the good of the order?
I was thinking earlier today, and you guys can just totally say no if this doesn't feel comfortable to anyone. But I don't know how you all feel about these meetings. I feel like with Zoom have not been terrible, or with the meetup or whatever it's called. But I didn't know if anyone felt like we could safely meet in a place like the fairgrounds because it's so big. Like if we all had our own table and sat down, if we need to do some workshops to get through some of the bigger content. And I don't want to suggest anything that makes anyone feel unsafe or get anyone sick. But I just was like, I feeling like I would be comfortable with in-person meetings at the fairgrounds in that big room. And if that felt like it was an easier way for, I guess I have, it's challenging for me sometimes to be a totally active listener on a device. Whereas if I'm in person, I'm more present and immersed in the process. And so I wanted to bring it up for discussion, but totally cool to just say no way if that's the consensus.
I agree completely, and I have no problem because I'm bulletproof and I'm good with it.
Okay, well, let me talk to Mike and see how he feels. We also have to keep in mind that with the new outbreak at Pacific Seafoods, we don't know what the impact will be if we're going to go back to a phase 1 type of situation under the governor's orders. So before we make an immediate decision, let's figure out what Mike has to say and what the governor has to say as well, and then we can figure that out.
Cool. No pressure at all. And I kind of forgot about that newest outbreak, so it makes sense to avoid meeting in person. I totally understand it. I just felt like with a big enough room, if we could spread out, but I just want to be as productive as possible and also very safe and healthy. So whatever you guys want to do is cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Other than that, Jim, did you have anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, Commissioner Webb? No. All right, thank you everyone, and I will talk to you or maybe see you on the 19th of October.